Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Staff Sergeant Maria Sannes stood just inside the open tent flap, clutching her comms pack against her chest as the rest of the forward operating base moved in its evening rhythm. Soldiers laughed. Over cards, a group on the far side passed the canteen back and forth between sets of push-ups. Someone's portable speaker crackled with a song half drowned by the chop of a departing Black Hawk. No one looked at her for long. If they did, the glance slid off like rain from a tarp. She'd been here before in other places, on other deployments, always with that same label taped to her back in invisible ink. Support personnel. It didn't matter that her last 3 rifle qualifications had been perfect scores, or that she could call wind speed to the half knot just by watching the tree line. The Army had found something she did exceptionally well: radio frequencies, encryption protocols, and decided that was all she was going to do. She could still hear Major Patterson's laugh from 2 weeks ago when she'd requested a transfer to Forb Reconnaissance. It had been the kind of laugh that said, "You're cute for even thinking you belong there." Her compromise had been this: FOB Kilo, closer to the action, Patterson had promised. But as Captain Rodriguez read her assignment, Ridge 7, 2 clicks north, a lonely observation post, she realized this wasn't a front-row seat to combat. It was exile with a radio antenna. Rodriguez didn't linger. "You'll coordinate between patrol units and base command," he'd said, already walking toward the command tent. "Call in supply drops, weather reports, the usual. It's a solo assignment. We don't have the manpower to keep you company. Up there, hope you don't mind the quiet." Maria had almost smiled at that. Quiet was a luxury she hadn't had in years. Quiet meant no sideways looks when she walked into a room. No offhand comments like the one she overheard from Corporal Jenkins as she stepped off the transport. "Another comes girl, but she's never fired that rifle outside of qualifying." She hadn't even bothered correcting him. Not worth it. That night, in the temporary quarters, she sat on her cot and stripped her M4 with the kind of careful focus that made people think she wasn't listening. Around her, the barracks conversation flowed in predictable waves: complaints about the food, arguments over a poker hand, someone planning their first meal back stateside. "Hey, Sannes!" Jenkins' voice broke through. Too close, he stood at the foot of her cot, watching her reassemble the bolt carrier. "Heard you're heading up to Ridge 7, rough duty, all alone with nothing but a radio for company." "Sounds perfect to me," she said without looking up. He chuckled, but there was something in his expression like he couldn't decide whether she was serious. Maria slid the bolt back into the upper receiver and thought about the intel. Briefs she'd read before leaving Kandahar. Valley activity was ticking upward. Enemy scouts moving like shadows through dry riverbeds. Farmers reporting strangers on their land. Ridge 7 wasn't just a quiet post. It was the kind of high ground that saw trouble coming before it even knew it was trouble. By the time she lay down that night, she'd already made the decision. She would treat this like her shot at reconnaissance work. Even if the Army didn't, if Ridge 7 was supposed to be eyes and ears, she'd be the best damn pair they'd ever had. Dawn on Ridge 7 was the kind of quiet you could taste. Sergeant Williams had led her up that first morning, boots grinding into loose rock, the base shrinking into a scatter of sand-colored tents behind them. He'd shown her the reinforced bunker-thick walls, narrow shooting slits, and the comms array hooked into the valley's radio net. Beyond that, the view stretched forever. Jagged ridges, a patchwork of green fields, the glint of a river curling like a silver knife through the valley floor. "Fair warning," he'd said, hands on hips. "Last guy up here lasted 2 weeks before requesting transfer." Said the silence was driving him crazy. Maria had looked at him and almost laughed. Silence was the point. After Williams left, the wind became her only company. She set up the way she liked. Range cards noting every landmark, wind flags fashioned from torn strips of cloth, a shooting log already filling with her neat handwriting. By the third day, she knew the valley like an old friend. the boulder that caught sunlight in 0647, the dried riverbed that offered perfect concealment in late afternoon, the way the goats moved with their herders in the low light of dawn. She'd use her mornings for cums checks, afternoons for what she called hunting practice, not shooting at anything alive, just pushing herself on extreme range targets she'd set up with GPS coordinates. The Army had given her an M4. It wasn't built for 1,200 meters, but with the right conditions and the right shooter. Every click of her scope adjustment was another quiet rebellion against the idea that she was just a communications specialist. 3 weeks in, the silence broke. It was a routine morning patrol Williams again, 6 men moving in perfect spacing. Along the valley floor, she watched through her binoculars as they approached checkpoint Delta. Everything looked fine. Too fine. The birds had gone quiet. Alpha, this is Ridge 7. Advise you hold position. Williams' voice came back, puzzled. We don't see anything. Maria's scope locked onto a flash of metal 800 meters ahead, wrong angle for debris. Too deliberate for chance. And then she saw him, an enemy scout. Earth-tone clothing blending into the rocks. A radio already lifting to his mouth. Her call for them to withdraw came fast. No argument, just movement. She watched the scout track. Them signaling others. Within minutes, 3 more fighters were in place. Exactly where Williams' men would have walked. Outstanding work, Ridge 7. Williams said when they were safe. How the hell did you spot them from up there? Lucky guess, she said. But it wasn't luck. It was 3 weeks of stillness, sharpening her senses until the valley spoke to her in patterns. She'd stopped listening for loud noises. It was the absences that told her the truth. That night, alone in the bunker, she cleaned her rifle and thought about the kind of soldier she'd decided to be. No one here had to see it yet. The proof would come in the quiet and the patience. In the shot no one expected her to take. The proof came sooner than she thought. It was mid-morning, the air crisp enough to cut. Patrol Bravo was moving toward the abandoned village of Kalina when the first shot cracked the valley open. Her scope snapped to the sound. Williams and his men were pinned down, scrambling behind a low stone wall, somewhere in the village. Muzzle flashes winked like tiny stars, but it was the sniper in the mosque's bell tower that owned the fight. Elevated, concealed, every time someone moved, a round whistled inches from their head. Bravo. Can you identify his exact position? Negative, Williams grunted over the radio. We can't get a clean shot. He's got us zeroed in. Through her scope, Maria found the tower. She saw the glint of his glass, just enough of a profile to know he was settling in for a kill. Down below, Martinez's voice cut in, tight with panic. Chun had taken a round in the shoulder. Jackson was hit in the leg. Air support was 20 minutes out. The QRF maybe 12. Williams' ammo was running low. And in her data book, Maria knew exactly what 1,247 meters meant for an M4 round, nearly 4 feet of drop. More than a foot of wind drift. She could hear her instructors in her head. That's not your weapons fight. Call it in and stay in your lane. She could also hear Martinez shouting for a tourniquet. And the breathless pause in Williams' voice as he realized they weren't going to hold for 12 minutes. Maria felt her hands stop shaking. She toggled her radio. Bravo. Keep your heads down for 30 seconds. No hesitation this time. She adjusted her scope. 3 clicks right for wind. 12 up for drop. The sniper in the tower leaned into his scope. Hunting. Maria exhaled halfway. Let the world shrink until it was just the crosshairs and the shadowed window. And then she pressed the trigger. The sound rolled across the valley like a slow wave. In her scope, the figure jerked back, then disappeared. The bell tower went still. She cycled the bolt and kept her cheek welded to the stock. Ready for a follow-up, nothing moved. Bravo. Threat neutralized, she said evenly. Proceed with casualty evacuation. She didn't add that the shooter had been taken out by a communications sergeant on a ridge 1.25 kilometers away. Let them wonder. In the valley below, Williams was already moving his wounded, and in the stillness above, Maria wiped her rifle down and packed it away. The shot had been a choice, a break in the rules. She would live with that, because somewhere, between the first glint of metal and the bell tower going silent, she'd stopped being just support and started being exactly what those men needed her to be. Who had taken that impossible shot? Maria didn't think about it when she climbed down from Ridge 7 the next morning. At least, not in a way that made her feel exposed. In her mind, the moment was already sealed in the quiet, filed away between 100 other choices soldiers made when no one was watching. But down at FOB Kilo, someone had been watching. The base was busier than she'd ever seen it. Extra vehicles lined the perimeter. Men in pressed uniforms moved like they had somewhere important to be. And in the center of it all, stepping off a UH-60 with the purposeful gait of a man who owned the ground he walked on, was General Morrison. She'd only seen him in briefing photos, silver hair cut to regulation, pale eyes that seemed to see through paperwork and people with equal ease. By the time she made it to the command tent, his voice was already carrying through the canvas walls. "I don't care if it was luck, skill, or divine intervention," he said. "Someone made a 1,200-meter shot in crosswind conditions and saved 6 American lives. I want to know who." Captain Rodriguez was briefing him, running through the ambush in detail. No marksman on base had been in position. None had taken credit. What about the observation posts? Morrison asked. Ridge 7 had the angle, Rodriguez admitted. But that's just a communications specialist, Staff Sergeant Santis. She's not a sniper. The words hit like a slap. Just a communications specialist. She'd been hearing. It seems basic. Morrison's answer was quiet but sharp. "I want to speak with this Santis. And I want ballistics analysis on that tower. Someone made that shot. We find them." Maria's stomach nodded. She hadn't lied yet, but she also hadn't told the truth. There was a difference. When she stepped into the tent, every conversation stopped. Morrison's gaze found her immediately, weighing her the way a man measures a rifle in his hands, looking for balance, flaws, potential. "Staff Sergeant Santis, I presume." "Yes, sir." She snapped to attention. "At ease," he said, circling her like he was walking the perimeter of a problem. "I understand you were manning Ridge 7 during yesterday's engagement." "That's correct, sir. I provided communication support and overwatch for Patrol Bravo." He asked her to recount the events. She did, every detail crisp, professional. Scrub it of the moment where she'd slid the safety off and lined up her scope. She talked about calling in medevac, about tracking enemy movement, about keeping the net clear for Williams' reports. She didn't mention the 30 seconds of silence. "And you saw nothing that would indicate the source of the shot?" Morrison asked. "No, sir." His eyes never left her face. "Interesting." Rodriguez was scrolling through a tablet. "Sir, her last qualification scores, perfect. 40 out of 40. 3 years running." Morrison's brow ticked upward. "Perfect score. That's unusual for someone who's just communications." "I practice regularly, sir. I believe in maintaining all my military skills." "I'm sure you do," he said. "What's the maximum effective range of your M4? She didn't blink. 500 meters for point targets. 600 for area targets. "And what's the range from Ridge 7 to the bell tower?" "Approximately 1,200 meters, sir." "Well beyond your weapon's effective range, wouldn't you say?" "Yes, sir." He turned to the room. "Gentlemen, we have a mystery. Someone made an extraordinary shot under extreme conditions. That kind of precision doesn't just happen. It takes skill, discipline, and nerve. Whoever did it belongs." In the record books, from the corner, Williams spoke. "Sir, Santis has been watching over my patrols for weeks. She spotted threats before they were even threats. Saved us more than once." Morrison studied him, then looked back at her. "Seems like you have a lot of lucky guesses, Sergeant." She kept her voice neutral. I pay attention to detail, sir. His smile was faint but knowing. I'm sure you do. An hour later, she was in his makeshift office, a converted supply tent with a folding desk and a single chair across from him. The folder in front of him was thick enough to be her entire career. Top 10% of your basic class, he began. Expert marksman every year. 3 denied transfer requests to reconnaissance. Why? Do you think they didn't approve you? My superiors felt my communication skills were too valuable to reassign, sir, or they couldn't see past the box they'd put you in, he said. He walked to a map pinned to the wall, tracing the line from Ridge 7 to the bell tower. Ballistics report says that shot was fired from an elevated position northwest of the target. Crosswind, 1 round, center mass. Only 3 positions could have done it. 2 were enemy held. The 3rd was yours. She stayed quiet. He picked up a photo of the tower after the engagement. We've analyzed every possible angle. It all comes back to Ridge 7, and there's a 30-second gap in your radio transmissions at exactly the time the shot was fired. Her throat was dry. Sir, I was coordinating medical evac. He finished for her. And maybe something else. She could deny it. She could say it was coincidence. But his eyes told her he'd already decided. Before she could answer, voices came from outside. Rodriguez entered with Williams Martinez and the surviving members of Bravo. I've called you here, Morrison told them, because someone saved your lives with extraordinary marksmanship. I intend to find out who. Williams didn't hesitate. Sir, Santis has been protecting us for weeks. Yesterday was no different. Martinez nodded. She spots threats no one else sees. And yesterday, she saved us. I don't care how. Morrison looked at her again, softer this time. These men trust you with their lives, Sergeant. She saw them all, their faces. The ones she'd tracked through glass for 3 weeks, whose movement patterns she knew better than her own. Williams, who'd been decent to her from the start. Martinez, who asked about her family like it mattered. She drew a breath that seemed to take the weight of the whole valley into her chest. Sir, she said, I took the shot. Silence. Williams' eyes widened. Martinez mouthed something like 1,200 meters under his breath. I wasn't supposed to, she continued. It was the longest shot I've ever attempted. But when you were pinned down and bleeding, when that sniper was taking you apart one by one, I couldn't sit there and watch you die. Morrison leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you understand you acted outside your assigned role? Without authorization? Using a weapon not designed for that range? Yes, sir. You also saved 6 lives, he said, and demonstrated the kind of initiative that defines the best soldiers in our army. The tightness in her chest eased just enough for her to look up. I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with V-Device. Morrison went on, and I'm personally ensuring your next assignment is where you want to be. Sir, you've been wasted in communications. The Army needs to see what you're capable of. Rodriguez looked like he was still catching up. Williams was grinning in disbelief. Maria just stood there, feeling the invisible weight she'd carried. Up and down that ridge for weeks, finally shift. For the first time since stepping off the transport at Kilo, she wasn't just anything. She was exactly what they hadn't known they needed. That night, back on Ridge 7, she sat in the dark with her scope on the valley, not because she had to, but because it felt wrong to leave it unwatched. The wind hummed low through the bunker slits. Far below, a patrol's flashlight winked like a star on the move. The Army had rules. She respected them. But she also knew this. Sometimes the right call wasn't the one in the manual. Sometimes it was the one you made in 30 seconds, with 6 lives balanced on a trigger. She rested her cheek against the stock, scanning the familiar lines of rock and shadow, and thought of Morrison's words. The best soldiers are the ones who break the rules when lives are on the line. Somewhere in the valley, she knew. The next test was already moving toward her, and she would be ready. What changes when the quiet stops feeling like isolation? and starts feeling like command. 6 months later, Maria Santis was back on Ridge 7 only now. It wasn't called that anymore. On every map and every report, it was Overwatch position. Alpha. The bunker walls had been reinforced, the floor leveled, the shooting slits widened for better angles. Her battered M4 had been replaced with a precision rifle system custom optics, adjustable bipod, match-grade ammunition. The radio array gleamed with new panels, connecting her to multiple patrols at once. But the biggest change wasn't in the gear. It was in the way soldiers looked at her. No more sidelong glances. No more dismissive jokes about the Comes girl. The new lieutenant leading Patrol Delta, Morrison, nephew to the Morrison, greeted her over the net with the kind of respect reserved for people whose names kept showing up in survival reports. Overwatch Alpha. This is Patrol Delta. Approaching. Checkpoint Bravo. Any movement in the valley? Maria swept her scope across the terrain. 6 months of advanced marksmanship training had honed her eye into something razor precise. She could read the wind on a flag at 800 meters, track heat shimmer over dry rock, sense the subtle ripple in the grass that meant human movement. Valley's clear, Delta. Route to objective Charlie looks clean. Copy, Alpha. Good to know you're watching over us. She acknowledged with a small smile. The Ridge 7 shot had taken on life of its own. She'd heard versions of it that claimed she made the shot in a sandstorm, that she'd been wounded at the time, that she'd used a weapon no one else in theater had even seen. The truth was dramatic enough, but soldiers loved to add their own weight to a legend. Back at base, Morrison had kept his promise. Instead of slotting her into a sniper unit, he'd created a new role, one that married her comms expertise with long-range engagement authority. She was still support, technically, but no one misunderstood what that meant anymore. That morning, Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the command frequency. Alpha, Morrison's inbound. ETA 15 minutes. Maria adjusted the wind flag outside her post. The general had made a habit of visiting once a month, partly to check on operations, partly Maria suspected to check on her. By the time his boots crunched up the ridge, his grin was already forming. Santis. How's the best Overwatch specialist in the Army? She stood, saluted. Just doing my job, sir. He waved her back to her scope. At ease. Show me this setup everyone's talking about. She walked him through the improvements, how the reinforced parapet allowed her to change positions without exposing herself, how the new optics let her identify a rifle type by its muzzle flash, how the comms upgrade meant she could coordinate with patrols moving on opposite ends of the valley. And it's working? Morrison asked, picking up her precision rifle with practiced hands. Better than I imagined, sir. Last week, I eliminated 2 IED emplacers before they could hit Charlie's route. I heard, he said. 2 shots, 2 kills at 900 meters. Instructors at the marksmanship school say you're the best student they've had in 5 years. They were good teachers, sir. They were, Morrison agreed. But they didn't make you exceptional. They just gave you the tools to prove it. They walked to the overlook where she'd once watched Williams and his men pinned down. The valley below lay in late morning calm fields, pale in the sunlight, shadows drawn long from the ridges. You know, Morrison said, I've thought a lot about that day. How close we came to losing 6 men because everyone was so focused on job descriptions. They couldn't see the solution right in front of them. Maria kept her scope scanning. I almost didn't take the shot. Protocol kept running through my head. And what changed your mind? I realized my lane was protecting those soldiers. The radio was just one tool. The rifle was another. Exactly, Morrison said, his voice carrying that rare mix of command and pride. Good soldiers follow orders. Exceptional ones know when to step beyond them to complete the mission. The radio crackled. Overwatch Alpha. This is Patrol Delta. We've reached Objective Charlie. Area secure, but unusual movement to the north. Can you take a look? Maria was already shifting her scope. The valley's rhythm was familiar to her. Now she knew what should be there and what shouldn't. 800 meters north, 3 figures moved through a ravine, low and deliberate, weapons in hand. Delta, I've got 3 armed personnel moving to flank your position. Grid 41, SMD 12,350, 67,895. Copy. Can you engage? 6 months ago, she might have called for air or guided the patrol away. Now, the calculation was instinctive. 800 meters. Minimal wind. Direct line of sight. Stand by, she said, already settling into position. The first shot dropped the lead figure. The other 2 scrambled for cover. But her reticle had already shifted. 2 more measured squeezes, 2 more bodies down. Delta, threats neutralized. Proceed with your mission. Outstanding work, Alpha. Thanks for keeping us safe. Beside her, Morrison let out a low whistle. 3 shots, 3 kills in under 30 seconds. That's not just doing your job, Sergeant. She looked up from the scope. It is now, sir. He studied her for a moment, then said, I've been talking to people at the Pentagon. We're considering a new MOSA hybrid role that combines comms, intel, and precision marksmanship. Soldiers who can do more than one thing exceptionally well. Maria blinked. Sir? The Army's realizing the old categories don't fit modern warfare. We need adaptability. Soldiers who can shift roles in seconds. He paused, watching her reaction. I want you to help shape it. Develop the training, identify the talent. She thought about the comms. Specialists is stuck behind desks who might be better shooters than half the sniper school graduates. About the mechanics who could outthink an EOD tech under fire. I'll do it, she said. One condition. What's that? I come back here regularly. This ridge taught me what I'm capable of. Whoever takes over needs to know that being support doesn't mean being secondary. Morrison extended his hand. Deal, Sergeant. Welcome to the future of the Army. They shook on it with the wind at their backs. The valley spread below, and the understanding that the next chapter wasn't just hers. It belonged to every soldier who'd ever been told they were just anything. That afternoon, as Morrison's helicopter lifted away, Maria returned to her scope. Somewhere in the valley, trouble would come again. When it did, she'd be ready, radio in one hand, rifle in the other, because up here, there were no lanes, only the mission. And she'd learned that sometimes the most important shot wasn't the one that ended the fight, but the one that changed everything after. What happens when the enemy learns your name? The wind was sharp that morning on Overwatch Alpha, snapping the strip of cloth she used for a wind flag hard enough to make it pop like a whip. Maria noted the gust pattern in her log northwest, fluctuating between 7 and 9 miles per hour, then brought her scope to bear on the valley. Nothing unusual yet, that in itself put her on edge. 3 days earlier, Delta had intercepted an encrypted transmission during a routine sweep near the border. The analysts at Division headquarters had cracked part of it. Just a phrase, repeated twice in Dari. Is she still alive? At first, it had been treated like the kind of battlefield rumor insurgents traded to keep their morale up. But then, the follow-up came cell chatter, traced to known militant networks in 2 provinces, all containing the same question. They were asking about her. She'd never considered herself a ghost story, but maybe that's what she'd become since the bell tower shot. An unseen force that reached across impossible distance and ended the fight. And if the wrong people believed she existed, they'd come looking by mid-morning. The valley started to change. A local herder she'd seen almost every day for the past month didn't show at the river bend. The usual trail of goat tracks was missing. In the west field, 2 women stopped, gathering bundles of grain earlier than usual, disappearing into a hut. Maria's pulse slowed, not in calm, but in focus. She keyed her radio. Delta, Alpha, recommend you slow movement. Possible changes in civilian pattern. Stand by for confirmation. The Lieutenant's voice came back steady. Copy. Alpha, holding at checkpoint. She began a sector scan, working each quadrant until her eyes blurred. On her second pass, the east ridge drew her attention. Rock outcrops, good cover, with a small patch of scrub at its base. Through her scope, a shadow shifted in a way the wind couldn't explain. Her hand drifted to the notebook where she'd logged every atmospheric condition for months. East ridge, morning hours wind would be slightly crossed from left to right, but broken by the rock face. If someone was set up there, they'd have partial wind protection and a clean angle on Delta's position. She switched to her spotting scope and found it a barrel, protruding just far enough from behind the rock to catch a thin sliver of sunlight. Delta, Alpha, possible hostile sniper. GRID 41SMD 12,348 67,890. You're in his field of fire. Alpha, we have no visual. That's the point, she said, already adjusting her rifle on the parapet. The distance was 980 meters, well within her comfort zone with the new precision system. But her gut told her not to pull the trigger just yet. If this was connected to the chatter, she needed to see what they were doing first. Through the glass, she caught movement beside the sniper. A second figure, speaking into a radio. Target acquisition. Coordination. Her mind went cold. This wasn't some random shooter they built. This to flush her out. She considered her options. Option 1. Take the shot now. Neutralize the sniper. Risk revealing her position. Option 2. Guide Delta out of the kill zone and wait. Maybe follow them back to their source. She chose a third path, one she'd never have considered before. Morrison's trust and her hybrid authority. Delta, this is Alpha. Slow withdrawal. Keep it casual. 2 men, 1 rifle, 1 spotter. They're watching you. Not engaging yet. Understood. Came the reply. Maria let the patrol fade back 50 meters before she shifted her rifle. Sighting not on the sniper, but the spotter, she took the shot between breaths. The spotter went down hard, his radio tumbling into the scrub. The sniper jerked back, dragging his weapon with him, clearly unsure where the shot had come from. Maria didn't fire again. She wanted him to wonder. 2 hours later, the debrief with Delta was tense. The lieutenant wanted to know why she hadn't eliminated both. Because, she said, now he's not sure if he missed me, or if I was never there at all. And uncertainty can be a weapon too. The truth was, she wanted him alive. Let him report back about the ghost on the ridge who saw his spotter before he saw her. Let him make their commanders second-guess every operation in this valley. That night, under red light in her bunker, Maria replayed the events. Her pen scratched over the page, noting wind, elevation, angle, target behavior. Morrison's voice broke over the command net. Santi's report. She told him everything. The chatter, the civilians disappearing early, the shadow on the east ridge. She left nothing out. You think they're hunting you, he said. I think they're hunting the idea of me, she replied. And that's harder to kill. There was a pause on the other end. Then keep it alive, Sergeant. Make them keep asking the question. 3 days later, the question came again. Different patrol, different sector, but the setup was the same. Sniper, spotter, prepared terrain. Only this time, Maria didn't wait. From Overwatch Alpha's west position, she eliminated the spotter at 1,100 meters. Then shifted and took the sniper before his scope even cleared the rock. The valley went still again somewhere. Radios would be buzzing with the bad news somewhere. The legend would grow a little more teeth, and up on the ridge, Maria logged her shots, marked the wind, and went back to scanning, because the question wasn't going away, and neither was she. How far would they go to silence a ghost? By the second week of targeted attempts against patrols in her sector, Maria could feel the change in the air at Fob Kilo. Conversations in the chow hall fell quiet when she walked in, not out of disrespect but out of the strange careful reverence soldiers get when they think they're looking at someone whose life expectancy just dropped. Even the younger privates had started saying it out loud now, the ghost sniper of Ridge 7. She hadn't invented the name. In fact, she hated it. It made her sound like a story told around campfires, not a soldier sitting in a cold, reinforced bunker with a rifle and a notepad. But the enemy chatter confirmed it was working. They didn't just know someone was up there. They believed she could see through rock and night. The problem was, belief works both ways. It started as a normal watch, overcast sky, cool wind blowing. Steady from the north, Maria had logged 2 patrols moving safely through their routes when she noticed a shift in the valley's soundscape. She didn't realize she'd learned to hear the absence of certain noises until one of them was gone. The river bend, where water usually chattered over the rocks, sounded muted. That meant the flow was being disrupted, something in the water. She keyed her mic. "Delta Alpha, I need you to halt movement immediately." "Alpha, we're 100 meters from checkpoint. Why?" She didn't answer. She was already swinging her scope toward the river bend. At first, she saw nothing but the shimmer of water. Then, just beneath the surface, 2 thin lengths of wire, barely visible, leading from the riverbank toward shaded recess in the rocks. Improvised mine trigger. "Delta, reroute north immediately. River's compromised." "Copy," came the reply, tight, controlled. They didn't even ask how she knew. As the patrol shifted course, Maria kept her eyes on the recess. She caught it, just a fraction of movement. A head ducking low, her reticle settled center mass. She didn't take the shot. Not yet. The figure emerged, holding a device she recognized instantly, a remote detonator. He looked toward the path Delta had just left, thumb brushing the trigger, and in that second she squeezed off 1 round. He dropped instantly. She didn't wait to see if anyone would try to recover him. She scanned up the ridge behind the recess and found 3 more, higher up, moving in practice formation. Sniper, spotter, guard. And they weren't set for Delta. They were angled toward her. The first round came in hot, chewing rock off the parapet inches from her cheek. She was already moving low crawl to her secondary position. The second round followed her, slower, probing. They were trying to pin her. She breathed through the adrenaline spike, running the calculation in her head. 3 shooters, each at roughly 700 meters, elevated above her, meaning they'd have the drop advantage. She toggled her radio to the base command frequency. "Alpha in contact, 3 hostiles, East Ridge above Riverbend, engaged." Captain Rodriguez's voice was instant. "QRF is moving. Hold position." Maria almost laughed. Hold position, as if she had anywhere else to go. She slid into position. 2. Her precision rifle already trained on the point man. It exposed just enough of his head to track her. Her breathing slowed. 1 shot down he went. The second and third shooters reacted instantly, breaking in opposite directions. She tracked the closer one first, catching him mid-sprint with a center mass hit. The third dove behind a rock outcrop. The QRF was still minutes away. The standoff stretched. She knew if she kept him pinned, he'd either break for cover and die or wait for reinforcements and risk being overrun. Her radio crackled. Morrison himself. "Alpha, status?" 1 hostile remaining, then behind rock at 700 meters. "I can hold." "You've already done enough," he said. "Stay alive until support arrives." Maria watched the rock through her scope. The angle was good, but she couldn't see him until she realized she didn't have to. She adjusted 3 clicks left and 1 up, aligning her shot with the shadow just behind the rock where his rifle barrel would have to clear if he fired. She waited. When the barrel edged out, she fired. The rock face spat dust, and the figure slumped forward into view. By the time the QRF arrived, she was still in position, scanning the ridge for more movement. The lieutenant on scene looked at the 3 bodies, then up at her post, and shook his head. 3 down, he said over the net. "Alpha's clear." That evening, Morrison called her to the command tent. The map on the table was marked with fresh intel enemy movements. Intercepted comms. They've stopped asking if you're alive, he said. Now they're asking how to kill you. Let them try, she said before she could stop herself. He smiled faintly. That confidence will serve you well, Sergeant. But don't forget, it's not just you on that ridge they're gunning for. It's the soldiers you protect. You've made the valley safer, yes, but you've also made yourself the highest value target here. She didn't argue. She just knew one thing. If they wanted to come for the ghost, they'd have to step into her scope to do it, and she'd be waiting. What happens when the battlefield shifts beneath your feet? The first sign came not from her scope, but from the radio at 0420. Still dark enough that the valley lay in shades of deep steel. Maria heard a voice break in on the Delta Patrol frequency urgent. Clipped, heavy with panic. Delta, this is Overwatch Alpha contact. 2 men down, taking fire from North Sector. Need immediate support. Her blood iced. She was Overwatch Alpha, and she wasn't in contact. She keyed her mic on the secure channel. Delta, Alpha, hold position. That's not me on your net. The lieutenant's reply was strained. Alpha, we heard you clear. As day. That's not me, Lieutenant. You moved to that location. You're walking into an ambush. There was a pause. Then, understood, holding. Maria pushed away from her console. Crossing to the secondary comms terminal, she pulled up the signal trace. Whoever had made that broadcast had mimicked her voice, not just the call sign. The tone, the cadence. It wasn't perfect, but in the confusion of combat, it could have been enough. She called it into command. Rodriguez didn't like what he heard. They've never tried this before, he said. If they're spoofing your voice, they're not just targeting you physically. They're trying to take away the trust between you and the patrols. Then they're getting smarter, Maria said. Rodriguez's jaw set. Or desperate. By 0600, she had her answer. The usual civilian patterns were wrong again. This time, too normal. The same herder in the same place. The same women in the field at the same hour. It felt staged. She glassed the north ridge. Nothing. East ridge clear, west empty. Then her scope caught it. A single shard of light. Deep in the valley shadow. Not a muzzle flash. Glass. She shifted focus and found it half buried in rubble, angled up toward her position. A mirror. It wasn't for signaling, it was for spotting her. Her stomach tightened. Someone in the valley was marking her position for someone else. Someone with a long gun and patience. She forced herself not to move suddenly. Instead, she eased back from the scope, adjusted her wind flag as though she'd seen nothing, and slid into the bunker's shadow from the blind side. She opened her spotting scope again, sweeping the ridges for the real shooter. It took 5 minutes to find him, a thin silhouette against the south ridge. Prone, rifle on bipod, perfectly lined up with the glinting mirror's reflection. Distance, 1,300 meters. Wind, light, left to right. Probability of first-round hit, less than 50%. Even for her, she could call for mortar fire and erase the whole ridge, but that would tip the enemy off to how quickly she'd found him. Instead, she keyed her mic on the command channel. Alpha to Delta. Stand by for movement toward grid 4-1 SMD 11,340 67,210. That's our shooter. I'm going to adjust his attitude, Rodriguez cut in. Santis, stay in your bunker. You are not to expose yourself at that range. She didn't answer. She was already lining up the shot. Her first round struck low, kicking dirt into the air. The figure shifted instantly, just enough to show the faint outline of his head above the scope line. Second shot, she didn't watch the impact. She just chambered the third and scanned for movement. Nothing. Rodriguez's voice came back. Confirm kill? Negative, but he's gone quiet. And that was the problem by midday. Reports came in small arms fire west of Delta's route. RPG activity in the north sector, and movement near the river bend. 3 different hotspots at once. Too many. For the QRF to hit all at once, Maria felt the trap tightening. If she picked one sector to cover, the others would go blind. She made her decision in seconds. Rodriguez, I'm leaving Alpha. I can get closer to the river bend and still cover. West sector from there. You step off that ridge, you lose your advantage, he warned. They already know where I am, she said. It's time to make them guess again. She moved fast, staying low, weaving through gullies and rock shelves every 100 meters. She checked the valley. The mirror was gone. The Southridge sniper was still silent. She reached an elevated ledge above the river bend, set up her rifle, and scanned. That's when she saw it. The reason for the chatter, the misdirection, the staged civilian routines. A single truck, parked half under a camo net on the far side of the bend. Too small for cargo, just big enough for... She magnified the scope until the image bit. Explosives, enough to take out a convoy. Her breathing went slow. 1 shot to disable the driver if he appeared. 2nd for the detonator. Movement. A figure in loose fatigues climbed into the cab. Maria squeezed. He dropped sideways into the dust. She shifted to the detonator, resting in the truck bed. 2 rounds first to break the housing, 2nd to scatter the internal charge. The blast was small, nothing like what it could have been, but in the headset, she heard the chaos enemy voices. Shouting in 3 different sectors, scrambling to react. They'd wanted her off the ridge. They'd gotten it. They hadn't counted on her still being in the fight. By the time she returned to Alpha, the sun was sinking. The valley was quiet again. Too quiet, but the patrols were all accounted for. Rodriguez met her at the ladder. You broke every rule of Overwatch, he said, and kept every patrol alive. She replied. He looked at her for a long moment. One day, Santis, you're gonna make a mistake. She thought about the mirror, the sniper, the truck, and the fact she was still standing. Maybe, she said, but it won't be today. Up on the ridge. In the last light, she logged the day's wind. She didn't write about the voice on the radio, or the way her hands had stayed steady even. When she'd known the trap was closing, some things didn't need to be in the record. Some things were just for the ghost. What do you do when the threat stops aiming at you and starts aiming through you? It began with silence, not the kind she'd grown used to on the ridge, but the wrong kind, the silence of a valley holding its breath. For 4 days after the riverbend truck up, there were no shots fired, no intercepted chatter about the ghost, no staged civilian patterns. Patrols moved without incident. The QRF sat idle. Maria didn't trust it for a second. On the 5th morning, Rodriguez came to Overwatch Alpha himself. He didn't waste time with small talk. They're not backing off, he said. They're regrouping. She raised an eyebrow. You have intel? Better than intel, we have absence. No movements, no comms at this. That means they're consolidating somewhere. Maria knew what that meant. Preparation. And preparation always came with a cost. The cost came at 1400 hours, Patrol Bravo, moving a supply convoy toward Checkpoint Charlie, reported spotting a group of children playing in the road ahead. The driver slowed, and in that moment, an RPG hit the lead truck. No casualties. But the kids scattered in a pattern Maria recognized instantly. 3 toward the east ridge, 2 toward the river bend. Not random. Coordinated. She swung her scope to the east. At 600 meters, 2 men appeared from a low ditch, sprinting toward the children. One carried a rifle. The other what looked like a medical bag, only it wasn't medical gear. It was wrapped too tightly, too deliberately. Explosives. She keyed her mic. Bravo Alpha, East Ridge, 2 hostiles moving on your flank. Do not engage civilians. Copy, Alpha, holding fire. Her reticle settled. She had a clean shot, but the kids were close, too close, 1 stray round, and her jaw clenched. She waited. The man with the rifle dropped to a knee. Raising it toward the convoy, she exhaled and squeezed. He went down. The second man froze, the bundle in his hand still sealed. The children bolted again, this time toward cover. Maria shifted her aim, one round into the dirt at his feet, warning. He looked up toward the ridge, directly at her position, as if he knew exactly where the ghost lived. Then he set the bundle down and ran. 2 hours later, the pattern repeated near Delta's route, different children. Same tactic, hostiles moving in under the cover of innocence. This time, she didn't wait. The first man dropped before his rifle cleared his shoulder. The second went down with the bundle still strapped across his chest. And still, she felt no relief, because now she understood the game. They were using civilians to buy hesitation, to make her think twice, to force the ghost into a corner where every shot was a more weight. That night, Rodriguez called her to the TOC. The maps were lit in cold red, grid coordinates marked in clusters. "They're testing you," he said, "seeing how close they can get before you pull the trigger. And when you hesitate, they close the gap." She finished. He studied her face. "You can't save everyone, Santis, and you can't shoulder what they put in front of you. That's how they win." She didn't answer, because he was wrong about one thing. She would. Shoulder it? She'd shoulder all of it if it meant one more patrol came home. The next day, the escalation hit. 3 patrols moved in staggered formation through the valley. Maria was tracking Delta when Bravo's voice cut across the net, ragged. "With urgency. Alpha, Bravo. Civilian casualty West Ridge. Need overwatch." She swung her scope, found the scene, 2 soldiers kneeling over a man in a blood-soaked shirt. 50 meters behind them, a figure with a scoped rifle appeared, braced against a rock. The angle was bad. A miss could hit the soldiers. She adjusted her scope, calculated the lead, and took the shot. The hostile dropped, but in the same moment, movement flared in her peripheral vision. East Ridge. 2 more shooters, both zeroed on Bravo. Her hands moved faster than thought. 2 shots. 2 kills, then swinging back to check the original downed shooter. Gone, later, in the debrief. The soldiers from Bravo swore the man they'd been treating had gotten up and walked away the second she engaged the ridge. Bait, pure bait, and it had worked. That night, alone in the bunker, Maria replayed the day in her head. She could feel the line tightening, not the physical danger, but the psychological squeeze. They weren't just trying to kill her anymore. They were trying to make her choose wrong. She opened her logbook, started a new page, and wrote 3 words. "Don't play." Theirs, then she closed it. From now on, she'd set the terms. At dawn, she put it into action. Instead of waiting for patrols to report movement, she pushed her scans deeper past the usual ridges, into the approaches beyond the valley. She used the upgraded comms to cross-check with drone feeds and intel. Intercepts. By 0930, she had the first break. A heat signature on the far south ridge. 2 men. Digging. Not a firing position. A cache. She relayed the grid to command. QRF rolled in and found what she'd suspected. Explosives. Ammunition, radios, enough for weeks of coordinated harassment. She stayed locked on the ridge as the QRF cleared it, and that's when she saw him, tall, lean, carrying a sniper rifle she recognized instantly, the same one from the South Ridge weeks before. He looked up at the QRF convoy, then beyond it toward her ridge, and he smiled. Maria didn't fire. Not yet. If he wanted her attention, he'd have it, but it would be on her terms. Because she knew now what this was building toward. A confrontation. Neither of them could walk away from, and when it came, it wouldn't be bait. It would be final. What do you do when the enemy you've been chasing finally steps into the open? The valley was too quiet. Not the brittle stillness of a storm about to break, but the deep, deliberate quiet of someone who wants you to hear nothing. Maria sat in the shadow of the parapet, scanning sectors she knew by heart. Every rock, every shadow, every bleached patch of dirt was committed to memory. If something moved, she'd know. But today, nothing did. Until 0813 hours, when a voice broke over the secure channel, calm, deliberate. "Lo, Sergeant Santys." Her blood cooled. The voice wasn't coming from her command net. It was coming from the open channel. She didn't answer. The voice came again. "I see you." She scanned hard across the ridges. Nothing then. A faint glint far to the southeast, beyond her usual field of overwatch. She swung her spotting scope. There he was, tall, lean, the same rifle, the same faint smile from the day before. He was prone behind a rock shelf, perfectly braced, perfectly patient, and he was looking straight at her. Every instinct screamed to take the shot. But he was over 1,400 meters, out beyond the envelope she trusted for a cold-bore hit. And she knew what this was. Not an attack, an invitation. She keyed her mic on the command net. "Rodriguez, I have visual on hostile sniper. GRID 41, SMD 11204. 66,990. He's outside effective range. Request drone support." Static. Then Rodriguez's voice. "Tight. Negative Alpha. Drone assets are grounded for maintenance." So it was just her. Exactly how he wanted it. For the next 2 hours, it was a chess match. He'd shift his position 20 meters. Just enough for her to spot him again. And every time she did, he'd let her. No camouflage. No rush. He was making sure she knew exactly where he was. She realized the trap then. Not a bait for her shot, but for her patience. He was trying to keep her focus on him so his people could move somewhere else unseen. She forced herself to break off her watch on him, cycling through all sectors at 10:30 hours. She found it 3 figures moving fast through a dry wash in West Sector, rifle slung, heading for Delta's patrol route. The long game clicked into place. She keyed her mic. "Delta, Alpha, break route immediately. West Wash compromised." "Copy. Alpha, moving." Through her scope, she watched the figures slow, confused. One raised his rifle toward where Delta had been. Maria put him down. The other 2 ran straight back toward the southeast ridge. Toward him, she swung her scope in time to see them crest the rock shelf where he'd been lying. He rose to meet them, said something she couldn't hear, then turned his rifle not toward her, but toward the valley floor. She didn't hesitate. 1,402 meters. She adjusted for the light wind, factored the elevation, let her breath fall into the rhythm she'd trained 1,000 times. The shot broke clean. He moved as if he'd known the exact second it was coming, rolling off the shelf and vanishing from view. She couldn't confirm the hit. For the rest of the day, there was no sign of him. No movement on the southeast ridge. No voices on the open channel. Rodriguez called up at 1700 hours. "You see him again?" "Not yet," she said. "Then he's either dead or he's waiting." She looked out over the valley, the sun bleeding into the ridges. "He's waiting," she said quietly. Night fell. The air turned sharp, the way it always did before dawn. Maria stayed awake in the bunker, listening to the valley's night noises, waiting for the absence that would tell her something was wrong. It came at 0247. The wind shifted, pushing a thin layer of dust across the parapet. The valley's usual rustle went still. She took her rifle, stepped out into the dark, and scanned the southeast ridge. Nothing then at the edge of her scope. A shadow detached itself from the rock and began moving downhill toward the river bend. She tracked him through the glass. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hiding. He was making sure she could see him. Maria moved to her secondary position, one that gave her a cleaner angle on the bend. She settled behind the rifle, adjusted her dope, and waited. When he reached the bend, he stopped, turned, and looked straight up at her. Even at this distance, she could feel the weight of it, the acknowledgement. This was the moment. She let her breath fall away, the world narrowing to the space. Between her heartbeat and the trigger, the shot was silent in her memory. Just the sight picture, the recoil, the long moment before the figure in the scope jerked, stumbled, and went still. She stayed on him for a full 5 minutes. No movement, no other figures emerging from the dark. Finally, she eased back, keyed her mic. Target down southeast. Ridge clear. Rodriguez's voice was quiet. Copy. Alpha, well done. In the morning, QRF confirmed Itmail sniper, mid-30s, custom rifle, extensive records of Allied patrol routes. On the last page of his notebook, written in deliberate block letters, were 2 words in English. The ghost. That night, Maria sat in the bunker. Her logbook open, pen hovering over the page. She could have written about wind speed, elevation, target distance. She could have detailed the tactics, the patience, the moment the game ended. Instead, she wrote a single line. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Then she closed the book. The valley was quiet again. Not the brutal quiet of a trap, but the unquiet of a day without loss. And on the ridge, the ghost kept watch,